All right. All right, here we go. All right. Does it say, let me go live. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. We are here with Doma Nunzio, the founder of Magic Myco, the MycoCoil, and the Cultivar Cup. Doma, I'm so stoked you're here today, my friend. I want everyone to learn about what you got going on over there. I want to take us through the website. More than that, can you maybe take a moment to introduce yourself and show and let people know what you're up to?
Yeah, what's up, George? Thanks for having me on the show. This is really great. I'm over here in New York City. I know you're over in Hawaii. It's the morning time over there. Over here, it's getting towards the evening. But just so the audience knows, there is just this quick disclaimer. I have no idea what George is going to ask me. Nothing here has been pre-planned. So if you have some kiddos in the room, maybe you want to get the kids out of the room. This conversation might go TVMA pretty quick. I really have no idea. So just, for safety and precautions, maybe you want to get the kiddos out of the room and leave this conversation to the adults. At that, feel free to ask me whatever you want.
Nice. Well, you would begin to touch upon the conference that you were at in New York with your friend over there. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Right, because I was talking about the kids. So, because we were over at the Horizons New York City conference in December, and there were so many amazing panels and things going on there that we agreed with, and we loved all the updates in the community and all this stuff. Towards the end of the conference, they asked a question to the audience like, "Do you think kids should be participating in this research? Do you think this medicine is okay to give to kids?" And a lot of the people said yes. And I'm of the opinion that the kids, they're a little too young. Their minds are a little bit too malleable, flexible. They're absorbing everything in, and they're not really ready for some of these experiences. So many of us have come to this mushrooms, entheogens, psychedelics industry through the cannabis industry. Many of us started in the cannabis industry, and with cannabis, there have been many great breakthroughs with cannabis for kids and all kinds of disorders, you name it. But when it comes to this, it's very mental and on the mind, and I just don't think they're ready. So that was just one thing that I didn't agree with at that conference. Yeah, so that's why I asked the kiddos, having said that, some of us are parents, we want to educate our kids how to be safe. My daughter, she goes mushroom foraging with me all the time. She knows they're all poison and to do very good research on them, and you have to cook them and all that stuff and how to take care of them. So to be very educated before you even step in that territory of consuming wild mushrooms, especially. So yeah, when it comes to the kids, education, awareness, being honest with them is really key.
Yeah, that was really well said, and I appreciate getting out in front of anything that could come our way, because it's a live conversation, and sometimes an interesting conversation tends to find itself in some deeper waters that may be interesting to some people but offensive to other people. And maybe we could just stay on the topic of that conference you went to just for a moment. That was one of the things you disagreed with. What were some of the things that you did agree with?
Well, there's a lot of great breakthroughs in the MDMA research in clinical trials. They're like in phase 3. That looks like that one is going to be, going through pretty soon. Also, there's been lots of breakthroughs with psilocybin and mushrooms. Yeah, I mentioned Gordo Tech. He's a good friend of mine. He actually has a free Patreon that you could look up all his posts for free, and he has some very informative posts. And one that he made just recently was about some of these topics for legalization of psychedelics. And he had a couple links on there, like a bill tracker link where you can track all the active bills that are going on in every state, see what's going on in your area, and maybe do something about it. Reach out to some of the Congress people, some of the assembly people, and get involved in the legislative conversations on how to legalize this or how to get involved with the bill directly.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I think that's important. So there was a lot of stuff like that, science breakthroughs, legal conversations, and stuff like that. Me and Gordo had a good time just, kicking it and watching all the panels. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time. I'm curious too, as someone who has, while probably still has a foot or maybe you don't, I don't know, maybe who had a foot in the cannabis industry, maybe you still do, and now you're branching out into this particular one. Do you see, what are some similarities and some differences?
Well, as far as the testing procedures go, as far as HPLC, for those who
Mm-hmm.
don't know what that is, that's chromatography. It's a liquid chromatography method that we use to measure potency, toxicity, and other things. There's some standard gear out there and standard consumables, and a lot of the same consumables and gear that will work for cannabis will also work for the mushrooms. So if some people are already set up to do, because there are many cannabis labs out there, but there are not many mushroom labs right now, it would be very easy to switch over a percentage of your operations, 10 or 20%, just into research, getting your methods developed and all your protocols up to date so that when it does come to your state that you could be ready. Because I do think that it's going to be big. I think, it's they call it the psychedelic renaissance. It's kind of like this term I see get thrown around a lot, but it is. It really is. It's like people are more interested now than ever. It's like a revival.
Yeah, it's true. And there is so much research being done, not only on the front of mental illness, but mental wellness, exploration. I even see athletes finding a way to use it to improve their performance. So there's like a biohacking aspect to it, and there's a learning aspect to it. People are taking it and solving problems. If we go back to Francis Crick and some of these scientists that were able to just take some time for quiet contemplation at some point in their journey, whether it was on, an entheogen of some kind, they're able to have these breakthroughs that they normally wouldn't have breakthroughs in. And who knows what is headed our way. But what I do know for sure is that we need people doing what you're doing to figure out, hey, what exactly is in this particular strain, or we need people to investigate that environment. And with that intro, maybe you can give some people some insight into what it is that HPLC does for the people that come to you. Like, why are people coming to you and wanting to get these tests?
So I run an online-based mycology work group through the Patreon, where you support us by pledging at different tier levels, and you get some different benefits. We have some lower tiers just supporting. We have some middle tiers where we also send out monthly projects like spores and stuff, where we could all work on the same genetic and kind of like research it together. And then we have some top tiers, which includes the testing. Now, the HPLC testing is great because it breaks down the material, the analytes, individually. So you can see them all separated individually. It's a really great reagent kit, and some other ones I know being developed on the market right now, like the Miraculous Q test kit, that will give you a good ballpark idea, and it's a good inexpensive home test to use to kind of get a ballpark idea what you're working with and to see if you would want to send them in for HPLC testing. Now, why would you want to send them in for HPLC testing? Because it's more accurate. Like I said, you could separate all the analytes and get independently not only the two major alkaloids, psilocybin and its active derivative psilocin, but also the minor alkaloids, which could lend possibly to some kind of entourage effect in the presence of the major alkaloids or an MAOI. So similar to cannabis, like with all the terpenes and all the cannabinoids, each strain could have a particular kind of effect, a good effect or a bad effect to some people. So that's why the testing is so important, so that people know what they're working with, because nobody wants to work with garbage strains, right? Us mycologists, we're making isolation. Some of them might look great on agar, and then we get to grain, and they don't even fruit right or something. So like you want to be periodically batch testing your strain, see what you got, see if you want to continue with it. And, beyond that, it's all about knowing how to dose. It's all about knowing how many milligrams of active compounds are in your 1 gram of mushrooms. 1 gram of mushrooms over here and 1 gram of mushrooms over there can be totally different. One could have 1 milligram of active alkaloids. The other one could have 30 or 40 milligrams of active alkaloids. So how can you tell somebody just here, go take this one, without really knowing all that? Now, sure, most of them are like averaged. We could get into different topics with the genetics, multi-spore cultures versus an isolate. There'll be less variation with an isolate than you'll get with a multi-spore culture. So usually we get our multi-spores, we kind of go pheno hunting or crossing these strains to make like a pheno that we like. A phenotype is basically a strain that has a specific set of characteristics that we like, that we want to try to retain and keep. So these are the kind of projects I do with the members online, and I am not a trained chemist. I don't have a degree in chemistry or bioscience. I have a whole bunch of trade degrees. Different phases in my life. I was a computer technician, artist. I was into some sciences and stuff like that. So like this kind of like it was a culmination of my life. Kind of like brought me to this place. Kind of a rough road brought me here. It wasn't like I was doing great in the cannabis industry, and I was I'm a trained chemist and I know everything that there is to know about chemistry. Far from it, I was in a bad accident when I was in my 20s. I almost lost my life, and followed by some pretty heavy opiate addiction for many years, which ruined my life in many ways, a few different times. And it wasn't. I had my first. You want to ask me about my first mushroom experience? Well, my first mushroom
Absolutely.
experience. Well, I was 18. I was a college
Okay.
student, right? And my girlfriend was going to Fordham University upstate. So I was up there with her in the dorm room. I was 18 years old with my girlfriend, and she had this bag of mushrooms. So we made tea out of it. And it was an incredibly peaceful, calm. I just remember sitting on the steps of this old college, the old college buildings, how they're like really like
Yeah.
old looking and stuff. And we're sitting there and it's nighttime and we're just looking at the trees, just the breeze going through the trees. And I can't even explain to you how euphoric that feeling was. But when I came back from that experience, I couldn't really explain it. I was a young guy. I was messing around with other drugs. I was doing a lot of ecstasy at the time, maybe for the wrong reasons. And I wasn't educated to MDMA or its healing potentials. I was just going to a rave or something.
Right.
So, and I had some bad, very, very bad experiences. So that was after college, figure 18, 19 years old. That kind of turned me off to that. And I kind of turned to heavier drugs, like cocaine, heroin, stuff like opiates and stuff like that. So when I got into the accident, I was 21 and I was already on the methadone program, which is an opiate addiction program that you have to go to every day, and it's very miserable. So I got into that motorcycle accident, and I couldn't get off the pain pills because now I broke my pelvis, I fractured my skull.
Mhm.
I thought I died, and I had a lot of mental instabilities after that, like for many years, like not even really believing that I even came back and wondering where the hell I was, like really crazy shit.
Yeah.
And whatever other drugs I did just exacerbated that. But through my fair, I would like to say moderate, but it was pretty much heavy, use of cannabis, it kind of helped curb some of those opiate withdrawals and stuff I was having. I switched up the program. I got onto Suboxone, which was a much easier program that you only had to go to once a month. Used the cannabis, and it wasn't until I was in my late 30s until life kind of pulled the carpet out from under me, and my wife left me, and I had nothing, and I was in this decrepit apartment all by myself, growing pot and doing BHO extractions in the basement, making gold hash oil at a time when it wasn't even in the High Times magazine. You never even saw it. And me and my buddies, we used to buy these sight glasses that used to go on the
Right.
front of the furnace, and we'd get a cork and put it on the top and like blast it straight through and make gold. We had gold, we had brown, we had green, we had all the best hash. But it was basement hash, you know what I mean?
Right.
So long story short, my life was pretty much crumbling to pieces, and just something out of nowhere was like, what about mushrooms? What about psychedelics? And I went online, I started looking up. Whoa, I saw it in the High Times magazine. That's where I saw
Mm.
it. That's why I brought up the High Times, because I saw it in the back of there was an ad in the back of the High Times magazine. So there was for a grow kit, and it was expensive. And I bought 2 or 3 of them, and I failed miserably. I got red mold in it. I was hiding the bags like in my ceiling and stuff, so when people came over, they wouldn't see it. I also had cannabis growing in the basement with my fertilizers and crap all over the place. So I was getting like lipstick molds and
Right.
fusarium, this purple shit that like, not a success for the whole first year and a half. Until I kind of got my shit together. I found a few good mentors, one through kind of like a pen pal relationship on a bulletin board online, and then another one through Willie Myco and his Triptine family chat. I joined up with his thing like in the beginning when he first started doing it, and I learned so much from him, and it made it possible for me to do the same things that he was doing and make it seem simple, you know? For a guy like me, I could figure it out. So,
Yeah.
you know, with just like some basic science and chemistry, do all those different projects. So I got into his thing for a couple years, and because I was into cannabis, I loved crossing strains, and I loved messing around with genetics. I did it with seed propagation, pollinating with the seeds. I also did it with the grafting the cuttings of the clones together and all that. And I used to be into it. I made my own strain one
Yeah.
time. I had it going. It was really good. I called it Tropic Thunder. It was badass. Somebody else has the name now. But it went extinct. I fucked it up. So, yeah. So through the cannabis, I got into the genetics. So when I came over to mushrooms, the first question I was asking was, how do I make a hybrid? How do we do this? You know, I started buying all the books. So for anybody out there
Right.
who's new, getting into mycology, like maybe for the first time, there's a couple really good books out there. The Paul Stamets Mushroom Cultivator book is like a Bible. Everybody has it, the blue book.
Right.
Radical Mycology is an excellent book. There's like 2 textbooks that we use in our Discord and our Patreon all the time, the Mushroom Cultivator and the Radical Mycology. So I picked up long story short, I pick up all Paul Stamets stuff because I find out he's the man. And I read that book, and right there on page 27, he takes 4 cultures, and they're not even monocultures, they're dikaryotic cultures. We could talk a little bit about the life cycle if you like. When a spore starts out, it creates a primary mycelium, which is monokaryotic. Mono because it's just one. It's just half of the genetics. It's one side of the genetics. So it needs to come together with another one, with another mate. Those 2 will fuse and form clamp connections between the hyphae, and they actually like meld, like mesh into one, and will exchange the nuclei between them. And that's how they exchange the gametes and the alleles, and that creates a new strain. So technically, when you're working with a multi-spore culture, you're making hundreds or dozens or hundreds of new strains. And then we
Oh,
go
wow.
isolate, take our phenos or whatever. But I wanted to just like experiment with all this, and a lot of the groups I got involved in were like, no, you can't do this. A few of them I just got booted right off, you know, like, I don't want to throw out any names because I like them all. And I'm still on them all with
Right.
secret names that nobody knows about. But I think my first name on the shroomery was the Joker. And everybody did was laugh at everything I said. Maybe that was a bad idea. But so I was like, screw it, I'm gonna do this shit anyway. I'll make my own group. So I went on Facebook. I made a group, MagicMycoFam Facebook group. You could go join it, and that's where it all started. I hooked up with a few people on there. Got some great genetics from all over, some really great places in Canada, in the United States. Got some spores from some great people too. I don't need to throw out names. We just had good genetics. So we started working with them. And started all these different projects, working with the monos, the dicaryons, studying about tetrapolar mycelium and unifactorial and bifactorial genetics and mutations and how all that fits in there. And these are topics that we still all hotly debated on the Discord, and we're still digging into and learning about it. So it's an ongoing evolution of our group. So basically, over the past few years of doing it myself, we've created some isolations, hybrids, whatever you want to call them. Some of which have done very well. One of them won this first psilocybin cup. I feel like I should throw that out there. Hosted and curated by Hyphae Labs, Oakland Hyphae Labs. Excellent group of people who also do testing and research, just like I do. And you should go check out, dig into all their stuff as well. They put on the psilocybin cup, which I believe now is called the Hyphae Cup. And they have conferences and do testing and all kinds of stuff. So definitely check them out. So I learned from everybody. I learned from watching everybody. Around the time that I found Oakland Hyphae was doing that contest, I was looking into these things myself, like testing equipment, because in making my hybrids and doing my projects, you know, half the people would say that I did it, and half the other people would say that I didn't do it. And I really, because I'm not a trained scientist, I really had no good skills or resources to document or to do a good experiment. So built the business up from my basement apartment, grew into a rather large business, especially after the psilocybin cup and stuff like that. And you know, ever since that, we had to move into a commercial lab space because we hit a whole bunch of roadblocks. We hit a whole bunch of roadblocks. Yeah, you can't do this stuff out of a residential address, guys. You got to have a commercial address, and anybody could do this research. You know, there are a couple different levels, and there's different certifications. There's a certification I'm pursuing right now in New York State because cannabis is legal, right? So I'm trying to get my ISO 17025 accreditation, which would make me a certified research laboratory, testing laboratory. And then I could also send in my application to be state cannabis testing lab. And with that would give us a whole bunch of new opportunities and maybe some stability so we could stay in this beautiful lab we just moved into. It's got a big 2,500 square foot lab. We got 2 HPLCs. We do potency testing, toxicity analysis. We could do DNA sequencing now. We also do those silo Q tests, and we use this really nifty absorbance meter. So we don't have to just look at the Q card anymore, the evaluation chart. We can actually get an actual score from the spectrometer, from the color meter. This is one made by Rodeo. Excellent, rather inexpensive. It runs on Python. You can install all your own calibration tables in here, make your own reagent kits and stuff like that. So those are all the kinds of things that I do with the MagicMycoFam team on the Patreon and the Discord. It started on the Facebook. Then after the psilocybin cup, we grew to the IG. And that's it. Here we are, rocking on, trying to. We got the Cultivar Cup coming up in June. The Cultivar Cup is our event. That we're hoping to get a good turnout this year, guys. So anybody can join. You know, we have 3 different entry fee levels. You could join as a non-member, pay full price. You could join as a member for half price, or if you're on one of those top testing tiers, you could get them for free. And we're going to have 5 categories. We're going to have a few cool sponsors giving away great prizes. And this is all, you know, it's not so much about who wins. It's about getting people involved, the education and the awareness. Naturally, the people who win will get some good promo and attention and stuff like that. And that's great. That's great for the whole community. Like you said, more people need to be doing this, stepping out there. You know, some people are scared right now because of the legalities. A lot of gray and red tape, right? A lot of red tape and gray areas right now we're trying to cut through. But if you set up a professional business and you pursue all the required and, you know, good legal routes, that all protects you legally for what you're doing, especially if you're doing it the way I'm doing.
Yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. It's like drugs. There's a right way to do them and a wrong way to do them.
Yeah, you know, which paradigm are you going to live in? You want to live in the old paradigm and be like, oh, I'm a drug dealer selling shit in my basement that's not legal? Or do you want to be like, shit, I ain't doing nothing wrong. Let's legalize this shit. You know, because it shouldn't be control 1. It should be lower. We got to get it. We got to deschedule. First of all, I'm trying to get involved in the bills in New York just to be a part of it, so that we could deprioritize criminalization and decriminalize and set a path for new modalities and different methods for setting up, like Oregon is doing. Oregon, I think, was the first state to put a plan into motion, and now they're trying to get set up. I know a few labs have been approved, and people are getting set up to do the therapy, to do the sessions, to do the clinical, to do the testing. So That's pretty big, what's going on in Oregon. All of us should be paying attention to that, and also what's going on in your own state, what bills are in your own state, and who is putting them up, which assembly people are putting them up. And you want to write those people, you want to email those people, tell them who you are, tell them you support this movement, and we need better modalities and procedures in process for testing, for clinical research, for studies and all that. And it'll get passed. It's going to get passed. I'm confident that all the psychedelics will be legalized by 2025.
You know, I'm curious. So you had mentioned Oregon and these different states that are beginning to pass up. You had mentioned that there's different kinds of people that are kind of coming to you for these different things. There's different events. Does it kind of seem like this community is growing together the same way Hyphae grows together? And like, it seems like we're
Yes.
building something,
Yeah, it's
right?
like a hive mind. It's almost
Yeah.
like that. We're on another level almost. It's like the internet. It's like we're our own internet, right? It's
Yeah.
like when you take these medicines, they connect these neurons and make these pathways in your brain that maybe weren't active or closed for a long time. And
Yeah.
that's what fires up, lights up those emotions, those feelings, those thoughts that you have. And sometimes they just need to surface out, and you need to purge a thought. Maybe you're not going to actually purge a material like vomit, but maybe you have to purge, maybe you have to cry, maybe you have to have a good cry, maybe you
Right.
have to laugh really freaking hard at something that maybe
Yeah.
you were taking too seriously. Maybe you have some serious issues, and like some of my friends, like, I need to go in my room for a little while in the dark and just go
Yep.
sit there and work some shit out. You know, there's really no such thing as a bad trip. Like those experiences people will chalk up to a bad trip. And that's where it's really important about our professionalism and the way that we conduct our trials and our research and our
Yeah.
experiments. You know, we have to do it professionally and aim to be as professional as we can, and not some dark basement, mycologist. Although that's great, and that's where we all came from. Um, in the end, all that darkness is going to get overtaken by a little bit of light. It's going to get legalized, and it's just going to open up.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm curious, what are the 5 categories? If someone enters the Cultivar Cup, what are the 5 categories they're going to be judged in?
Great question. So we got Cubensis,
Okay.
we got exotics, which is anything other than Cubensis.
Hmm.
Your Pancyans, your Bisporus, all that will be, your Nataliensis, Tampanesis, all that will be considered under exotics. Then we have extracts. Okay, so
Mm.
if you make an extract from your mushrooms, it could be a dry, it could be a wet extract. Cordyceps, and the last one is cannabis.
Have you seen a lot of extracts? I haven't seen, like, this is kind of a newer thing
No,
that's emerging. I haven't seen a lot of extracts. What's the word on that?
no, and we just started doing this testing in the past year, and I've
Okay.
seen some really great stuff over the past 5 years. And I wish I had some of it here now to test,
Me
because we're
too.
not getting enough samples. No, we're not. And the preliminary data coming in is very skewed. Like what we should, like COG, which is the crystal of the gods extraction that people do with the mushrooms that make these crystal, it was once believed to maybe be pure psilocybin.
Mm.
And to make matters worse, people like Alexander Shulgin, who's like looked up to as a god, we all love him naturally, but he's thrown out a few cockamamie ideas, and he's a brilliant thinker. He was a brilliant chemist, but he didn't even have a good computer. He didn't have an HPLC. He didn't have none of this stuff to confirm, really. He just knew how all the molecules were designed and how to design them and put them together, and based it all off those theories. But he threw out a couple cockamamie things, one of which saying that it would be 99% pure psilocybin, which just bolstered the whole belief in the community. There's some other things going around too, like with additives and substrates. I believe in using natural additives in your
Mm.
substrates. Some people like to use manure or not. That's all great. Whatever your base substrate is, that's great. But then usually sometimes people will use a little additive. And especially for testing purposes, I recommend that you set your experiments up with a control. All
Mm.
good experiments have a control. So in other words, you have your one that you do all the time, like your CVG or your DHM substrate, dehydrated horse manure, or your core vermin gypsum, right? That's like, say, your tried and true. So you'll have that. But then side by side, maybe now we'll have that, but with an additive. Maybe this one has more calcium.
Mm.
Maybe this one has more tryptophan. We tried to do that. We tried to give it
Mm.
5-HTP. What I like to recommend is to give it an experiment with natural additives: calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, magnesium, all these natural elements and trace minerals and elements. What I don't recommend is using your good drugs like 5-ameo DMT that's very expensive and adding it to your substrate in hopes of making a new compound, because the preliminary results show it's not happening.
Mm. I've read about some silomethoxin and talked to some guys that were using, I think it was bufo, and they were feeding it to the mushrooms, and then they got, I don't know what their process was, but they had gone through and found a way for it to create this
Yeah.
new substance. Have you heard about anything like that? Like what
Yeah,
are
and
people?
I've seen many reports from labs just like mine. I think we've all tested it and know that it's bullshit, but none of us really want to touch the topic because of the legalities.
Mm,
However, I would like to think that the people running the church have, they're trying to protect themselves and their customers, and they have good intentions, and they're just trying to heal people, and they're trying to protect themselves legally. Uh, I've tested it. I found psilocybin and psilocin right away.
yeah, it's interesting to think about the way that it works, and it's an interesting theory to think about. I guess, I want to show some people an actual report that you guys have. Is there? And I have them all right here, right here. Uh,
Cool, cool, yeah, great.
maybe we could go through this one here. This is the what is this one? This is the APR 29 right here. So maybe you could kind of walk us through this, and people could get a real understanding of what's happening there.
Sure. So our reports are kind of evolving. And I
Okay.
mentioned that I'm seeking accreditation to be a certified ISO state lab, right? So in doing that, it has me upgrading some of my procedures and implementing some processes that are necessary. And I'm very glad that I came across in this business, like new computer systems, a LIMS system,
Mm-hmm.
an ELN system. We have to have our own COAs. So these,
Right.
which is a report, basically.
Right.
So these reports that you're showing right now is basically an evolution of the style of report that I have been making for the past year. Looks very nice. It's fancy. It has a nice little background overlay there with some mushrooms. We also test the fly agaric. On that one, it has a fly agaric in the background. And the cannabis one, it has a cannabis leaf in the background. They look great, and they also pertain the information, most of it, that it needs to have. But in the future, we might have an actual official COA that will be, accepted under state certification. We're getting there. This is very great. In this report, we basically give you some basic information on top, like the strain and the species, and some basic attributes that the cultivator might have used, like the lighting or the substrate. Then we have a little alkaloid profile, those pie charts, which basically just breaks down all the compounds that were found in the material and kind of breaks it down into a pie chart of, those percentages, those ratios. Then a little bit underneath that is the big table chart. That big table chart basically tells you individually, one by one, all the different analytes and the level at which they were found, both in milligrams per gram and also in percent. Got a couple of bold numbers over there on the right, and that's your totals. And the one with the little purple highlight is your PCBE. Now you see the main thing that we're studying with these alkaloids are the two main alkaloids, the psilocybin and the psilocin. Sure, the minors are very important. All the other stuff
Mm-hmm.
we haven't found yet is very important and should be listed on there and put into an added up total as it is there. And as it's done in cannabis tests and on cannabis labels. But when it comes to psilocybin and the bioavailability of psilocybin and the way that it converts to psilocin, in the body. The different levels of psilocybin and psilocin will give a potentially different effect, right? Because the psilocin is the active metabolite of the psilocybin. So if you consume more psilocin, it's going to hit you faster. It's going to be a faster onset. It might be slightly more intense, but it'll also fade away quicker, much quicker. Whereas the psilocybin needs to still break down in your body. So when you take it, it's going to go through your liver, through your organs, it's going to get digested and then broken down into the psilocin, which will then break down further. And so those effects will have a longer onset, like up to 90 minutes before it hits you. But it will last a much longer duration, almost like a time release. It just keeps kicking you. So the combination of those two, will pretty much determine how, the bioavailability as you take it into your body. So because of this, it is good to give the added up total, as I mentioned before, but we also have what's called the PCBE, which is the psilocybin equivalent value. So psilocin is much more potent than psilocybin in its raw form. So we do a little calculation to convert based on the molecular weight, psilocybin into psilocin and psilocin into psilocybin, and we give you those two figures there. So the PCBE is your psilocybin equivalent. And then next to it on the left, in a little smaller print there, is the PCNE, which is the psilocin equivalent. I made the psilocybin equivalent the main highlighted figure because I believe that is most important. So that figure should be more accurate in terms of how it's going to hit you and how it's going to feel.
On a side note, as you talk about this, my brain kind of goes in this direction. What if you were to get like a good extract? Is that similar to like 4-ACO-DMT or these analogs? Like pure extract would be 4-ACO-DMT or something like it, right?
Well, it depends on your process. If you use like a lot, like with the lemon, with the Whippatech, if you use an acidic solvent, it's going to convert most of it into your psilocin. So it's not going to be shelf stable for very long. Those water extracts, those blue water extracts, might kick your ass on the first day, but after about 7 days, they're going to oxidize and they're going to lose everything. So that's why psilocybin we say is king. It's the king alkaloid because it's the most shelf stable. So just to get real quick, just to finish with the report, because you wanted me to walk you through it. There's a little QR code there. So what the QR code is that is an NFT link. So if you were to click or to scan that QR code, it'll take you to the Ethereum blockchain on OpenSea, where it links to a page with that strain, April 29, and in the description there'll be a link to this very report that you're looking at. So the report links to the NFT, and the NFT links to the report. We set this up in the beginning because we saw some other professional labs doing it for time stamping purposes, also to have the NFT as a collectible, a few other reasons. There's other ways to also do this. There's DOI numbers, which is a meta tag kind of number that professional researchers usually apply for. They could supply DOI numbers in their reports and research papers. And also, as we do some of the genetic sequences, we're getting back the ascension numbers. So we're also adding those numbers onto the report too. So you might see it evolve a little bit over the course, in the future, as it has been this whole time. But if you go down, so this is like basically your nice cover page. This is basically your cover page, my current COA, I sign it at the bottom. And then it goes on a few more pages. This is the actual chem station report. Now this isn't required. This is not required to give, not in any form or fashion. But I like to show my work in the whole. As I've been evolving and learning myself and developing our methods, I've been liking to show the actual chem station report, which tells you all the settings of the method, how I ran it. It's hard for me to see. It tells you all my equipment, and as you scroll down, it'll give you the actual chromatograph on one of those pages, tell you how much I used, sample volume, the dilution factors, everything. So then it gives you the actual chromatograph right there. And it'll list for you the peaks. So each one of those peaks is another analyte that we can measure. How can we know? How can we measure? Well, it's called a reference standard. So we buy these reference standards from chemical companies that basically is a known amount of, say, psilocybin. So they'll send us 1 milligram in 1 milliliter of acetonitrile of psilocybin. So we know exactly how much is in there. So when we compare that one against the sample, that's how we can measure and set up our calibration tables and give you an accurate result. So that's those peaks there. Each one, the separation that we were talking about, the solvent goes and passes over this column. It's called a stationary phase column that's filled, packed with a whole bunch of silica gel. And basically, there's some different interactions in there based on the size, based on the electric properties, based on the dipole properties. And different analytes will get hung up in the column more than others. So some will come out faster and some will come out slower. So for this method, I have a pretty long HPLC column. It's 150 millimeters because it needs that time to kind of separate and get all in. I mean, we have other columns and there's different methods. This method that we're looking at here is called reverse phase chromatography, okay? We're not inventing anything new here. This is a tried and true standard method that has been along for many, many decades. It's called a reverse phase chromatography, and there's a couple ways to run in those methods. You can run in an isocratic format, or you can run in a gradient format. And that basically just has to do with your solvents and if you just stay the same or if you change from one to the other over the course of the run. So this is a very standard procedure, reverse phase chromatography. However, this particular psilocybin mushrooms or any psilocybes in general, there's just, like we said, there hasn't been enough research. People think reverse phase isn't very good for this because it's the polar analytes and because they don't have very good retention on the column. But the columns have gotten so much better. Even though the machines are still old, the columns have gotten so much better. The way that we mix our mobile phases has gotten simpler and more efficient. And the sample prep process, which is the biggest variable in testing between labs, is how do they do their sample prep process? Most sample prep processes are very easy, like with cannabis or some extracts. But when it comes to some extracts, but when it comes to like psilocybin mushrooms, all the medicine is stuck inside the tissues, inside the fibrous chitin, the tissue, so it takes more energy to break them out. That's why we do double concoctions. That's why we do an alcohol concoction and then a water concoction or vice versa. You know, that's why we do this, because it extracts different solubles and insolubles from the material. Whereas if you did that with cannabis, you would extract too much shit. You would get an RSO or something because you would just take everything, the fats, the lipids. That's why we blast straight through with the BHO, because we just want the liquid to just go past it cold. All the medicine's on the outside of the plant. It's just going to strip it right off. We even freeze it to make it brittle, and all those trichomes will just break right off and come right out. When it comes to mushrooms, it needs to soak, it needs to absorb, it needs to break that cell wall so the medicine could be released. In the beginning now, that was taking me 2 days to do. Now I see other people's methods and procedures, and they were doing it much different than me. And their scores were coming out lower. So I think that maybe some of the extraction processes weren't done, or maybe, you know, it's just now it's better. But yeah, now we got it down to 2 hours. So that's great. That's great for mushrooms. I could do high throughput all day long. Yeah. So that's great. So that's our reports, and you know, they're coming along. We'll probably have a little upgraded one once we get the, you know, official COA kind of variety going. But that's it. So, you know, we tried to implement a bunch of different things: the NFT, the time stamping, the full report, make a little cover page for it. So, you know, you get a lot for your money if you wanted to get a test. And the prices with the new developments and efficiencies, the prices are coming down. So we can offer better prices. That's why I encourage people to get signed up, so you could get a discount, or you could get, you know, some testing for free. Get involved with our members and make some friends, share some projects. You don't have to either. If you want to do it private and anonymous, that's fine. You know, we have a spot you could get a private report, or under the reporting name on the form, you could just put anonymous. You know, some people that might be what they want, and that's okay. You know, all the data, it goes far in helping us, because like we were saying, it's not that these processes aren't known or that they haven't even been done before. there's just not enough. You know, how can you just do one stem and cap experiment and say that's it, stems are stronger than cap, or vice versa, or whatever? You know, you got to do it over and over and over on a lot of different strains, and then over time we're going to compile hypothesis and see trends and be able to chart all these great things. So that's where we're at. We're basically in a spot of going professional, right? That's the way I like to think about it.
Yeah, I think the whole community or the whole space is in that same spot. Like everybody, it's new, it's novel, and people are traversing the environment. Now look at this chart right here. You as someone who does this all the time, you could probably look at these profiles and be like, oh, that's a cubensis or that's a paniolos or
Right,
so
just
when
by the look of it.
right. Yeah. So this one is this one a cubensis right here?
Yes, this is a cubensis strain.
And then what is this like is this a really good cubensis strain? Is it these different biocysteines and psilocybin? If you were going to create, or maybe the strain that you created, did your bar chart look like this, or like what are you looking for in a really good strain? If you were just going to look at the profile, how would you know?
Basically, I'm looking for a high psilocybin content, and
Right.
everything else falls second for me. We
Okay.
know the other minor alkaloids where there are. There are a few unknown ones and a few mystery ones, especially with some of the exotics. A couple in particular are like azurescence and
Mm.
Nataliensis. We're also finding trace amounts
Mm-hmm.
of MAOIs. MAOIs,
Mm.
they're fun to research because they're so fluorescent and they fluoresce under a UV light. So if you do a methanol extraction of your mushroom material and then look at it under a UV light, sometimes you'll see it could change color. Contaminations could also fluoresce too. So
Mm.
those are some things that we're looking into now. But the MAOIs are present in some varieties of mushrooms. They're at such a low level that it might not really do much. But if you take everything and put it together, that entourage effect as a
Right.
whole might add up to be something special and substantial. But yeah, we're in a big experimental phase right now. We're collecting data, developing these methods. You know, we have a very open source sharing approach to it. You know, some people don't,
Right.
or maybe they're just not at that level yet. But I think that people should share. You know, I mean, we're a pretty big community, and we want to be part of it. We want to be part of it as it becomes legalized, and so they don't like ruin it. Like some, you know, we should learn from our experiences with the cannabis industry
Mm-hmm.
and all the trials and tribulations we went through there with legalization and testing and, you know, all this state by state stuff, I got to say, really stuck. So we got to just deschedule it and things will move faster. But it's great that we have all these bills going now. New York, that I know of, has 3 going right now, one of which is looking really good. So, you know, who knows? It could be happening really soon. I want to be ready.
Yeah, I had another question on. Yeah, you will be. I think you guys are at the forefront, and there's some great people working in here. I'm curious. I'm just putting on my curiosity hat, but it seems to me that when we look at cannabis, and if we're using cannabis as somewhat of a model, different strains tend to have different attributes or characteristics about them. And I'm wondering, maybe in the future we're going to be able to see, oh, well, this particular strain of mushrooms may
Right.
help people with Alzheimer's, or this particular strain may be good for people with epilepsy, or maybe this particular strain is something that's been really helpful for people with PTSD. Is that something that could be working in the future or something you see on the horizon?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Short answer, yes. To a point. To a point,
Right.
because there is. It is very subjective and depends on the
Sure.
person's mental state. And many of these drugs can sometimes cause the same exact reactions in people. So, you know, more study is needed. A lot of times it's subjective depending on what's going on in your life, what's on your mind. And although, yeah, like LSD is going to be much different than like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, psilocybin or MDMA, sure, it's going to be different, but it might trigger like the same kind of response, emotional response or, you know, physiological response in your body. Um, Having said that, yes, I do think that we will find out in the future some more details about this one's good for this ailment or this one's good for that ailment. Maybe this one has more beta glucan, so it's good for
Mm.
this, or that, you know, this one has more. You know, maybe we'll find out. because we know more about the pathway now. So baocystin and norbaocystin is actually part of the pathway. And the psilocybin and psilocin can actually go back and forth, which is kind of interesting. And I also find it interesting that psilocybin, as it degrades, can turn into psilocin, but it could also turn into norpsilocin. And baocystin can turn into psilocybin. So we might notice some trends, like if it had a really high baocystin, like maybe we picked it mature, or vice versa. Like if it has a really high psilocin content and the psilocybin is really low, like my TW4 batch on this last report, it was because I let it go too long. I let it go to the point where they were turning black and they were basically rotting and senescing. So when some people see that really black bluing, they think I got the strongest shit. Maybe, yeah, maybe it was there. But if you see that, that means it's already degrading and losing what it had. So some of the strongest, highest testing strains that I have tested have come to me with almost no bruising because they were handled correctly. And these pancyans are just flying off the charts. And if you ever seen a cubensis next to a pancyan, you know, cubensis is fibrous. They could be very large and fibrous, a lot of material there, right? A lot of chitin. But with these pancyans, it's almost like tissue paper. There's like nothing there. Like you can't say to go do the same dehydrator technique because if you put those in for 24 hours, they might get dried to a crisp and take out all the alkaloids. Like they dry really fast. And because there's almost no material there, they just leave behind a lot of alkaloids and they test really high. So I think that's part of the reason. Having said that, we were also talking about a couple other strains like the Azis and a couple others, which were finding this other molecule that I don't know what it is yet, and I'm checking all the other ones that come after psilocin, and I still don't know what it is. And there's this big mysterious wood lovers paralysis thing that people are talking about a lot. So maybe that could be the peak, and I'm trying to figure out what that is. It's not the serotonin, it's not the TMT, it's not the DMT. I looked into all of those. It's not. It's this very weird peak. Do you have access to all my reports right now? Can you bring up an ASI report?
I think so. Yeah.
That's
Hang
all
on
right.
1 second.
That's all right. All the reports are available.
I can do it
on
right
the
here.
website.
One of these ones right here.
Yeah, we did some good ones this month. Dehydration experiment with a freeze dryer versus dehydrator. Now I'm getting off topic. The peanuts. Is there any ASIs on there? No, we got fly agaric though. It was the month before. So if you go up to the hamburger bar on the top and click on journals, reports, lab journal, and then go to February. You might have to just like, go back up. Yeah, right there, lab reports.
Right here, lab reports.
Yeah, is there like icons in that window? Can you scroll up?
How about reports?
Oh, yeah, right there, right there, right there. There's March. Just scroll over to number 2. Will be February.
I don't see number 2. Oh, right here.
There you go. There you go.
Okay.
Click. Just click that. Now go down. Do you see any links for ASIs?
February.
We've got a lot
23?
of good stuff for testers. No, not that one.
Yeah. 2-page results, 23rd in depth.
Yeah,
solvent.
keep going. Go all the way down. Sorry, guys. I want them to see this. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. ASIs right here.
All right, try that one. Let's see if that one. I'm not sure if this one had it. Not all of the ASI samples had it, but some of the higher ones did. Go down to the chromatograph. It might have been January. So you could reach all these reports. His computer's loading. Okay, so that one, see, it has these other alkaloid. Yeah. This one also had 5-HT.
Yeah.
So that is another one, but it doesn't have the other peak that I was talking about. So right after the psilocin peak, the second to the last peak, on a bunch of ASI samples, I get another peak right there. Right. You might have to go to another month, like January.
Okay.
But you know, the fam could do it if they want. All the reports are available on the website. There's links to all these reports, and they could go check that out. So I give all that in our in-depth report. I'll probably always do that because I think that it's nice for other testing labs to see the settings that I used.
Yeah.
But as far as certification, I might have a different, like, official, like, stamp approved, like COA with the totals on it in the end that I actually give the customer. This one's great. Maybe I could still use this one. We'll find out. But as we get better, we're adding the genetic information, DOI. We got the NFT on there. You know, maybe you win the cup and your strain is really good and you want the NFT just to have it, you know.
Yeah. The NF, beautiful idea. You know, the MAOI images that you talked about are probably pretty awesome artwork too. Do you have those for NFTs? Like you could almost sell those as artworks, you know, on top of it with that. I guess you're kind of doing that already,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I'm not selling them. It's just like we're collecting them. So if you get the
right,
report, it's
right,
included. It's just included with your report. And you know, wherever those links and if we use it for the research, we'll get tagged along with it. Like we said before, if you wanted an anonymous report and you don't want us to use it for our
right,
research, that's fine too. You know, maybe you're doing batch
right,
testing and you don't want everybody to see everything you send it in because some you know is
right.
bunk and you just want to see what is bunk and what's not. So, you know, just state that on your report and that's fine. But we want to be able to share as much as possible. We're asking people to pledge as much as they can, get on the top tier, get the free entry to the Cultivar Cup, and I'll make a nice written report too for it. It'll be sweet.
You know, I want to touch base a little bit about the beginning of the conversation where, like, I think a lot of us have gone through some times where we've found ourselves be pretty creative. Like when you were making new strains in cannabis and stuff, and sometimes like you just come up with these ideas. Like I'm going to put these two together. I'm going to use this. The ideas I had that I tried, and it's all subjective for me because I didn't have any control group like that. Was I used like a N52 neodymium magnet, and I exposed the cultivation to that. And in my mind, of course, it turned out super awesome. I'm wondering, have you ever used like a high-powered magnet
Yes.
exposing those spores and stuff? Have you tried using those magnets before?
Wonder if I could. Is there a way to turn my camera around? No, I
Okay.
don't think so. I don't think there is, but I was going
Okay.
to turn my camera around so I could show you something in front of me. But yes, there's a big magnet right over here, and I have magnets, and I've done
Yeah.
it on agar.
Okay.
I've done electrical experiments. I've done agar experiments with magnets, agar, all kinds of additives that you could possibly imagine. I've put in copper wires in them and shocked them.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, you give it lightning. So you know what I found with that one? First of all, it was a very dangerous device. This is pre-MycoCoil, right? So MycoCoil,
Okay. Okay.
MycoCoil is my sterilizer device. It's nice, safe, patented technology. But before that, I was trying out this thing called a lightning plate, and we were shocking the agar with stun guns, basically, and we were rebuilding them to make this lightning plate. But it wasn't very safe. I don't know how I would have managed to get that to everybody. I think a few people did get one, but but yeah, they're pretty dangerous. We had a couple of electrodes on them. But what we found, and the Japanese have some good research
Right.
on this with the oyster mushrooms as well. And I think
Okay.
also the Bible has some good research on this too with the manna. So basically, you get that microclimate in that negative ions in the air, and you get that microclimate, that like little fog, and then you get some electricity and add a bolt of lightning in there, and when it hits the ground, you know what happens? It fries the spot that it hits, and it turns black and kills anything that was there. But then all around that area, like in a big ring, you could get all mushrooms, literally, like overnight. The manna, right? I think that's maybe
Wow.
the manna. So, but here's the thing. Here's a trend that I'm noticing. Some of these faster fruiting strains, like the ones that pop up overnight, tend to come out way less potent, even sometimes inactive. Whereas some of the strains that take longer to fruit, they got to be in the toad for a while, they always come out stronger. It's like they had more time to do their chemical factory process
Right.
and make the good stuff. Whereas with the lightning hitting it, yeah, we're doing Frankenstein, but we're just growing one up overnight, and it doesn't have
Right.
much time to make the good stuff. So it
Yeah,
might be
it's
good to
fascinating.
feed. It might be good to feed like an army, but you know, if you want to have an experience, it would probably be pretty mild. But still, it was a cool experiment. Yeah, we do all kinds of experiments like that on agar, some of them which I'd like to get back to. But I think the most important reason why you brought that up was because with the fusions and the hybrids, so there's a lot of rumors and not any good documented research online about people using snake venom to do this in the past. I never had any access to snake venom. I don't even know where to get that shit. So I have all antibiotics and gentamicin, streptomycin, gentamicin. I got a penicillin, amoxicillin. I got all these different antibiotics in my lab. So I started experimenting with those. And some of them have gram negative and gram positive action. And you could look up what that means online. Like it'll affect certain bacterial strains, but it won't with some molds, or it will with both. And you can look up what that means,
Mm.
gram negative and positive. But I found that by using a gram negative and positive antibiotic like amoxicillin or penicillin that everybody has in their medicine cabinet, and using very, very little as an additive in my agar dish, um, would basically make the strains grow slow.
Oh, I lost them. Power out.
And
Oh,
okay, can you still hear me? Sorry,
yep.
phone
There you
call
go.
came. So in the beginning, when we were doing these sandwich smashes, and like we cut out 2 hole punches of an agar cut and put them together like a sandwich on top of the agar, on top of this antibiotic agar. So some of the antibiotic additives that only have like one way positive or negative action, like the strain, like very similar to activated charcoal, like it might keep the contams away and you might get a nice rhizomorphic strain with these ropes,
Mm.
but they'll be popping out here and there as they try to get to the nutrients, and they have a little bit of resistance against the antibiotic. But when you use the gram negative and positive one, like the penicillin or the amoxicillin, it makes everything grow slow and in place. Those rhizomorphs don't pop out, so you don't have any chance for like phenotypes here and there, like all over the place. One very definite indicator is you could see a very clear, distinct line that will form in between your strains, and that usually means that it didn't fuse, you know. But with this way, with the sandwich on the agar, with the antibiotic, it made it grow really slow, and it made it grow in place, that it forced it to like grow over each other and meld. And then we grow that out, and then we take
Mm-mm.
cuttings off that plate, like multiple cuttings, and put that into an LC jar, swish it all up, and I let it go like 6 months and colonize in 3D and like a 3D solution, like a 3D suspension. And
Wow.
that's how I made Trinity. That's how I made Trinity. And it was, in the beginning, it was like so uniform and stable and looked really good. And we've isolated it further since then, but there was almost nothing like that first one. It was really stable and pure. It was really good. So that's how we finished them. Since then, I've come up with some new techniques using the same kind of strategies, but with different buffers, use different solution. And I learned some of those biology hacks from using other people's kits, like the Odin. The Odin.com has some great bacteria kits, mycelium kits, you name it, genetics kits, CRISPR kits, and I started using all his
Mm.
kits and messing around with the CRISPR genes and the
Yeah.
GFP fluorescent proteins, and some of these antibiotics. You could also get your DNA sequencing stuff there and everything. Yeah, so that's a good resource. So I just started playing with that and found that that worked. His transformation buffer. So he has a transformation buffer that you can use with, say, bacteria and a GFP protein to try to insert this plasmid DNA, which is basically one strand of the DNA in a circle, and try to, what the buffer does is it softens, basically what I would imagine the snake venom would do would be to like soften that cell wall and disintegrate it to enough so that the two can come
Mm.
together, or that the plasmid can be inserted into the nucleus, or if it's two strains, so that the two spores, or so there's two hyphae, can come together and clamp and start sharing their nuclei. And that's how you get your new strain. And then I would do it in the buffer solution in test tubes, and do it that way. So we just have a new way of doing it. I still do the smash tech sometimes. It's fun and fast and easy. It's kind of like, a little bit more. You could get some more varied, some more variety. It might be a little harder to like isolate a really good one. That LC finishing trick is really good for doing that, though. Don't go right to the grain. Go to LC right after the agar.
Man, it's exciting. It's a whole new, I don't know, environment to be trying things and doing things. And you had mentioned if people get on a certain tier, they're able to follow along with some of your experiments. So they could get a spore print or something like that, and then they could begin to do their own. Is that accurate?
Every month, yes, we have a small benefit, a medium benefit, and a large benefit. The small benefit is usually just like a 2 milliliter vial with some spores or LC. The medium one is sometimes also like agar dishes, so you have like a full project. And then the highest ones, you get like 2 of everything, plus you could send in samples for testing.
Perfect. Perfect. I gotta, Doma, I learned a lot by talking to you today, and I'm really excited to get to see people at the forefront that are one of us, that are people that come up and maybe they didn't go to Stanford and get a degree, but they're the people that are at the forefront that really care about creating things that make the world a little bit better. And I consider you one of those guys, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm hopeful
Thank
for
you.
the future. Maybe we can cover the Cultivar Cup, or maybe we can talk more going forward to talk about new things. And but before I let you go, man, what do you got coming up? Where can people find you, and what are you excited about?
Definitely. So we got the monthly testing. We got the Cultivar coming up. The deadline is June 1st. So if you have any questions about the Cultivar Cup, you can email me at cultivarcup@gmail.com. If you want to email me at my private email about anything whatsoever, it's Doma, D-O-M-A, @magicmyco.org. And you could go to magicmyco.org and find everything you need about testing there. If you'd like to see my spore vendor shop, it's on magicmyco.com. And magicmyco.net is a page with all the links, is the link tree.
You know what? I don't think we touched on the MycoCoil, man. If people wanted to get into that or check it out, can they buy that on your site?
Sure, they could buy it on the site. There's also a special site. They could buy it on the magicmyco.com, or they could also go to mycocoil.com. And if you're listening to this video, you're part of the fam now, so try to use coupon code MMFAM. MMFAM. Okay, coupon code MMFAM. Try that one.
Nice. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. MMFAM. Use that code. Check out Doma. Follow him. Guys, he's got a lot of incredible things coming up. And I didn't even know about the Oakland team over there, but I'm really thankful to get to talk to you. And I think everybody that's in this space should be having a spotlight on you, man, because we see good things coming out of the lab. And I'm stoked to be part of the MMFAM, and looking forward to our future conversations, man.
Thank you, George.
Right,
I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Pleasure's all mine. That's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your time.
Peace.
All right. Let me end this one here. And then